ambassador of Jesus. Thank you. Talk to you later. Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be talking to you today again and sharing with you some ideas about being a caring person and spreading the light of Christ in this world through acts of care and kindness. Sometimes people make it more complicated than they need to. And so I'd like to share with you a few ideas that illustrate how simple it is to be the light of the world and make the lives of other people brighter in ways that you certainly are capable. Some months ago, I had a meeting in my office and a woman came in and she said she had been early to the meeting and so she had just stayed in her car and read the book that she had with her. Then another car pulled up next to her. She turned and looked, and there was a woman in that car alone. And so my friend smiled at her and then went back to reading. A few minutes later, there was a knock at her window, and there the lady stood. She rolled down her window, and the lady said, "I just want to thank you for smiling at me. I've had a hard day, and your smile just lifted a lot of the cares and worries from my heart. It was so healing." So that's an example that everyone is capable of participating in, just giving people smiles. And smiles have a magic way of lifting people's spirits and healing some of the hurts and worries. A while back I was in Chicago and I had rented a car, and after picking it up and getting the papers, I was approaching the exit where I had to stop one last time to show the papers to the man. He looked at the papers and handed them back to me. And he said, "Have a blessed day." I was so surprised, and my heart was so warmed by those words that he gave to me. He gave me a gift. He didn't have to say anything. He just was doing his job, but he went above and beyond his normal duties, and from somewhere in his heart or in his training or in his expectation of what he should give to people, he handed out blessings, and I got one. So it's very simple. It just takes thoughtfulness. There's a man on the block where I live who leaves the soda pop and water bottles in a sack by the curb every day. He is aware that there's a homeless man that comes by to look for such things, to help him get a little money to find food and whatever he needs. And so that man makes an effort to just leave those empty containers for that needy person. One of the shocking stories I heard a few years ago really helped me wake up to the needs of followers of Jesus to be more conscientious about care and kindness. This story was told me by a pastor, and he said that he and his wife have several friends who are single mothers who make a living as waitresses in restaurants. And he said, in a conversation with a couple of them, they told him how much they disliked working on Sunday. Well, I thought he was going to say because they wanted to go to church. But instead he said, no, they worked at a particular restaurant, and nearby was a large church. And on Sunday noon, many people from that large church came to eat at their restaurant. And then they said the clincher, why they disliked working on Sunday. They said the church people, of all people, were the most demanding, the most rude, and the chintziest tippers. I couldn't believe what I heard, but they said it was true. He said it was a very true story that his friends had told him. What an impression these people from the church were making. The waitresses knew where they came from, and so they knew exactly who they were. That story really impressed on me the necessity of talking to followers of Jesus, that we become more hyper vigilant in our everyday work and everyday walk to sprinkle and spread kindness and care everywhere we go. So in talking with you on this subject, I want to give you some information, but I hope also it will eventuate in transformation. We all need to be transformed, to be sensitive and conscientious and aware of the opportunities we have, small, simple ways to make the world a better place and to show people that God's followers are working hard to make the world a better place and that we care for people. So the second story that I heard that really distressed me was when a mother told me that she had brought her child, who was a child with Down syndrome, to the church nursery on Sunday morning. And to her dismay, the other mothers who were present, kind of oohing and eyeing over the other babies, stayed away from her and stayed away from her baby. It was as if they had noticed and they didn't know what to say. It's not that they were mean people or bad people. It was just that they felt that they wouldn't know exactly what to say, I guess. And so they added a hurt to this woman's life by neglecting to come over and surround her with support and love. That was the second story that really inspired me to speak to God's people about working harder on care and kindness. One of my friends told me a story about backing out of his driveway, and a new neighbor had been walking by, and he waved to her. Okay? He knew she was from a distant country and did not speak English, but he waved to her. The next day, after he had backed out of the driveway, there she was again on her morning walk, and he waved to her. No response. On the third day, he noticed her sitting at the corner when he drove past, and he waved to her. And then he noticed as he turned the corner and looked in his rearview mirror, she got up and left after he had turned the corner and waved to her. And several times in the coming days, he noticed that same thing. She was waiting for him to wave to her. It was like in her loneliness, that simple act really blessed her soul and broke through her loneliness. Many of you know the name Marilyn Monroe. And she said, she was asked one time, in all those foster homes in which you grew up, did anyone ever show you love? And she said, yes, once. When the foster mother was powdering her nose, she patted me on the nose with her powder puff. She said, that was an act of love, one of the few that I received. So showing love and making this world a better place is really simple. Jesus said, your faith can be like a mustard seed. So things can start so small and grow into something big. So there's so much that we can do. And it doesn't have to be grandiose or fantastic, just simple acts of care and kindness, and they will grow into something very big, brightening the world for Jesus' sake. Thank you. Greetings, my friends. It's great to be with you again this morning, and I am happy to talk to you today about some of the ideas of being a good listener. In a future lesson, I'll talk in more detail, but I want to say some general principles that I think are important that you can use. And most of these are taken from the book, my book, The Miracle of Kindness, Changing the World One Act at a Time, which I hope you will consult because it's in detail there. But when we talk about listening, we're really talking about something which is really basic to being a caring person. It is hard to be a caring person if you can't listen to people. If you are, by nature, just a talker. Talking is important and wonderful and helpful and enjoyable, but to be a caring person, we need to be able to put our own conversing skills on hold and hear what people have to say. But really, what listening, good listening is about, it's about helping another person to talk. So that when you listen well, you say words that encourage the other one to keep sharing what's in their heart and what's in their mind. So if we can think of listening that way, that it's really wrapped up with responding to people. It is helping facilitate another person to talk. To be a caring person really means that we are able to take an interest in their story. And to be interested in people's stories is a real blessing because people are so interesting. One of the other main principles that we need to remember when we are trying to be a caring listener is that we pay attention to their feelings. We listen for their feelings more than for information. The information is important in some ways, but when people are hurting, or if we want to pick up on the distresses or fears or worries in their life, we need to pay attention to their feelings, their emotions. I like to say we listen to people and our third ear tunes into their feelings. Our other ears hear the facts, the information, but the third ear is always tuned in to their feelings. For example, if a person says to you, "My grandma died today," she is giving you important information, but it's your third ear that hears sadness. She didn't say she was sad. She just told you that her grandma died. But your third ear hears sadness, grief. And so when you respond to that information, it usually is most satisfying to the person if you respond to the hurt, the sadness, the grief, with words like, "Oh, that's got to be hard for you," or "Oh, that's sad." Some way you communicate to them that you have tuned in and accept their feelings of sadness. When we tune into someone's feelings, we are more likely to connect with them as persons than if we just stay on the information level. The information is important, but we connect with people as persons when we hear and respond and acknowledge their feelings. So that's one of the principles that we will talk about in greater depth another time, but it means that we value people's feelings and we accept people's feelings. We do not discourage their feelings. We do not try to talk them out of their feelings. We are appreciating them as feeling people, and we believe that as they talk about their feelings, they feel better, that they share them with you. It lifts their hearts and lifts their spirits. Sometimes, of course, that means that when we tune into someone's feelings, like if you say to the woman who said, "My grandma died today," and you say, "Oh, that is sad," she might tear up. Tears might come to her eyes. One of the listening principles that we need to know is that when a person shows tears, begins to cry, something good is happening, not something bad. And so we don't try to close it off or close it down or run away from it. We may reach out to them with a hug, or we may say some more words that show that we accept their tears. Sometimes we cry with them, because sometimes one person's tears make tears come to our eyes. And we need to be comfortable with that and to really be thankful for tears rather than regard them as something unwanted. One of the principles of being a good listener that I'd like to remind you of at this point is that we are not there to fix people. We're there to hear them, to share with them, to walk with them, both figuratively or literally, and to allow them to talk about their feelings. But we should not have in our mind the idea that I've got to now fix them if something is hurt or broken or in distress. Leave the fixing to God. God does heal people. God heals the brokenhearted, and He heals people who are sad. But He expects us to be there for them, to reach out and touch them literally, and to put our arms around them, and to let them talk. One of the ways that we sometimes help a person who is hurting is to name the issue that we think is going on in them. Now, I like to call this naming the elephant. It's a familiar expression in our society, and it really means that you talk about something that both of you know is there, and yet sometimes you're reluctant or fearful to talk about. Let me give you an example. I had a class with a group of people a couple of years ago, and one day Bill came in, and he had bruises and injuries on his face. He really looked beat up. And I said to him, "Bill, what happened to you?" He said, "Well, I slipped on the rocks at Newport Beach and fell on my face." And I said to him, "It looks like this happened several days ago," because it was already starting to heal up. He said, "Yes, it happened a week ago." But he said, "You know what? You're the first person who asked me what happened." I was astounded. And it really puzzled me, because it was so obvious, and yet he'd been among people and no one had asked him, "Bill, what happened?" Well, that's an example of naming the elephant. I don't know why people avoided it. Maybe they thought his wife had beat him up or something and didn't dare say it. But it was such an easy thing to say, and it needed to be said. So naming the elephant is one of the things that we need to be willing to do. One of the places that this is most often appreciated is with someone who has just lost a loved one through death or through divorce. And those people want to talk about the person who has died. And yet most people avoid the subject. So you meet Anne, and you know her husband died recently, and it's easy to get into just little superficial chatter about the weather or sports or clothing or something. And yet both of you are thinking of the fact that her husband died a short time ago. That's a perfect time to show caring by bringing up her loss. Just a simple question. How has it been since your husband died? Or a little statement, you know, we all miss Bill since he left us to go to Jesus. You bring it up, you introduce the subject, and inevitably they overflow with conversation because they've been waiting for someone to bring up the subject that is biggest in their heart and that they need to share, and it's such a healing thing. So take those little risks. Doesn't always work, but most of the time God's people are ready, willing, and able to open up if we just ask, "How you doing?" and name the elephant. Okay? Thank you for listening, and I hope your life will continue to be blessed, and I'll talk to you again later. Thank you. Greetings, my friends. It's great to be with you again today, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that people are spiritual, not just physical. We are created by God as physical, spiritual entities. And these two qualities are so intertwined that you can't affect one without affecting the other. And in the care and kindness concept, we are primarily trying to help you to see that a kind act, a caring word, or any care you do to another person is a spiritual gift, and it touches a person's heart, and that actually impacts them physically. There's a proverb in the Old Testament that says, "Kind words are like honey, sweet to the taste and good for your health." Imagine that. Kind words are good for your health. Now that was 2,000 years ago that they claimed that. Today, it is a measurable reality. They have found that if you speak kind words to a person and they do a blood test on that person, their hemoglobin is actually raised. They are healthier. They are physically healthier after a kind word. So the kind words don't just go in their ears and stay in their head, but they affect the whole body. The bodily functions are touched and affected by kindness that we give to people. So that's such a very exciting and important thing that we realize as we talk about care and kindness, that a kind act is a spiritual act, that we are not doing something different from what we would do if we talked to them directly about God. You talk about God, you're giving spiritual gifts. But when you give kindness and consideration, when you make a call on someone, when you pat somebody on the back, this too is spiritual. And as we talked about earlier, God is love, and this is love, and this is God coming from us into other people. And it's blessing them and helping them spiritually and physically. All creatures are helped by love. I think there's been some quaint and interesting experiments that affect plants and pets, where they measure the health and well-being of these living beings and find that care and even kind words benefits them physically. And so we need to see people as spiritual. We need to see that they are not just physical beings, and that when we connect to them, God is coming through us to help them and to heal them. And so when we go to the hospital to visit someone who is sick, we are part of the healing team. People get better more smoothly when friends care about them, when people pray for them, when visits are made and cards are sent. These are spirit-touching commodities. And those spirit-touching commodities affect the physical being. Many years ago, there was a study that was done in a cardiac care hospital. And these people who were studied were seriously ill with heart problems. And they were all connected to machines and EKGs and so forth. And a research person noticed that there were little islands of health in many people's printouts of their EKG strip. And at those points, they were puzzled why that person's heart beat healthfully during that period of time. Well, then they did some careful examination to find out what was going on in that person's life, in that hospital unit, at the point where the heart seemed to be normalized. And to their surprise, in each case, it was when a nurse or an attendant was helping the person, laying their hands on them and changing bandages or fixing the bed or straightening them up. But there was personal contact. And during those minutes of personal contact, the heart beat normally. I'd like to share a story that I read recently. It's really quite remarkable. And it's about a man who was a Spanish explorer in the 16th century. His name was Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. And he was the only survivor of a shipwreck in the Gulf of Mexico long ago. And a Gulf Coast tribe of indigenous Mexicans rescued him and brought him into their village. They were a sad group of people, victims of drought and famine, and many of them very diseased. Núñez, of course, had nothing to give them to help them. All he had gone down with the ship, and he didn't even have an education about helping sick folk, much less any medicine. All he had was himself and prayer. But to his amazement, in giving them his loving, faithful attention and care and touch, he began to see those Mexican people getting well and healed. They began telling him they were well. And he realized, as he said, I was far more than I thought I was. So that's what we're trying to stress, that each of us has an obligation and a responsibility and an opportunity to be actively part of lifting people's spirits, and in the process, their whole body is affected. Some of you remember the story of Norman Cousins. Norman Cousins had an illness that he learned was terminal. And he decided that that illness had come on to him because he had been through some very stressful and negative circumstances. So when he arranged for conventional medical care from the physicians, he also added something very surprising. He negotiated with someone to come in for a couple hours every day and show him funny videos, candid camera, and others that really tickled his funny bone. So every day for a couple hours he would laugh. And to the amazement of everybody, after he laughed for a couple hours, his body was measurably healthier. And he overcame that illness. He beat that unbeatable illness by resorting to spirit-lifting commodities called laughter. And that was just such a powerful example that we are spiritual beings. And the extent to which we reach out to each other, care for each other, maintain our friendships, we are actually in the process of taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves, because we are this physical, spiritual unity. And that which hurts us spiritually, hurts us physically. And the other way around too. When we get hurt physically, we get spiritually discouraged. And so we need a constant diet of helpful, loving kindness that we give to the people around us. And each one of us has that to offer. There's no one who's disqualified. There's no one who doesn't have it. There's no one who doesn't have a smile to share, or ears to listen, or a voice of encouragement. We are all part of God's party to heal and to help each other. So thank you for being part of that. And I'll talk to you again later. It's great to be with you again today.